Well, good morning, and it's really exciting to be able to spend a good part of my day today on the campus. I actually spent a couple hours this morning up on North Campus. Anybody here reside up on North Campus? Okay. So we had a panel discussion this morning all about entrepreneurship and some of the exciting things that are happening, and the focus was on how Michigan gets its mojo back. Did any of you happen to catch that via webcast, or were you there? We had a pretty good, we had someone who actually caught it. What did you think? Did I do okay? Okay, all right, good. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the things we covered this morning and really what it takes in order for us to be successful as a state and to have a vibrant entrepreneurial culture here in the state of Michigan. What I thought I'd do, though, is maybe give you a little bit more background on myself so you get a sense that I actually have some idea of what I'm talking about, right? Because I find it interesting that a lot of folks who are teaching and coaching and doing other things in the entrepreneurial space haven't had as much hands-on experience as you might think. And that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that, but I really come as a practical person. I spent most of my career in manufacturing. I ran a company that made aerospace components. We grew the company pretty substantially during the 14 years or so that I was with the company. And then I left and decided to do this kind of work. Helping other companies grow, helping individuals make connections to resources and other things that it's going to take in order to be successful. And during that time period, I learned an awful lot about how to navigate all the resources that are out there. I learned an awful lot about how to build the right kind of ecosystem that it takes to support companies, because during my experience in the private sector, I tried to work with organizations like the State of Michigan or the Michigan Economic Development Corporation with varying degrees of success, not only in Michigan, but around the world. And there were varying degrees of ease of use, is probably the best way to put it, for the resources that were available. And there were varying degrees of entrepreneurial ecosystems that were in place to support businesses like the one that I ran. And so what we've tried to do is bring that kind of sensibility to what we're doing right now at the state of Michigan. So, the first and foremost thing that we looked at was, what do we have right now as an entrepreneurial ecosystem? And I got involved in this work, by the way, for the first time back in 2000, right? That might have been about the time some of you were starting kindergarten, right? And so I started in this kind of work, and we almost immediately identified that virtually every major gap that you could identify in order to have an entrepreneurial climate, virtually every one of those gaps existed in the state of Michigan. Right? So we were starting from a real deficit position, right? We had no ecosystem to support entrepreneurs. Everybody here know Google, Groupon, maybe Sun Microsystems, right? Twitter, and I can go on and on. And the one thing that all those companies have in common, their founders, their CEOs, their senior management, all have roots here in the state of Michigan, right? But not one of those companies was founded and grew to its ultimate success in the state of Michigan. Now some of them do have locations here. In fact, I actually worked with the team at Google to locate the office that they have in downtown Ann Arbor right now when I was at Spark. But why didn't Google happen in Michigan? Why didn't Twitter happen in Michigan? Why didn't Sun Microsystems happen in Michigan? Why didn't Groupon happen here? And I can go on and on. It's because we didn't have these basic elements that it takes to be successful for entrepreneurs like those who founded those great companies. First of all, you need a team that can help you make it happen, right? You need others like you, like the young man who was up here talking about his invention. You have to have other like-minded people, and then you have to have some folks who have a little bit of experience in navigating through the whole business cycle in order to be successful. So you've got to have talent. There's got to be a good talent pool, especially if you have a technology-based company. You've got to have a great talent pool to support your growth. You've got to have money. In fact, money is probably the thing that comes up most when I talk to aspiring entrepreneurs. They want to know where they can get their first round of venture capital. And for the most part, that's not what they need most, but at least it's one of the issues that they've identified. So having access to capital, really important. Access to mentors and coaches, folks who really have been successful, who've started companies, who've failed at companies, who understands how to grow a business. Having access to that kind of individual was just simply missing. It was something we had to put in place. Having a robust network throughout the state of incubators and business accelerators like Ann Arbor Spark that could be immediate resources you could go to and tap into right away became one of the things that we identified that was simply lacking. And then it's just all the networking that happens through whatever your social networks are. And I say social networks now because they're so popular. 10, 14 years ago, social networking was hardly a term that anybody understood. And so we just simply networked. So whatever you do right now to network, it was missing. Because through networking, a lot of really good idea exchange happens, right? I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I've talked to in various networking sessions where an idea that I offer up or that someone else in the room offers up becomes an opportunity for them to move forward with their business that much faster. And then the other thing that was most missing, it was access to that first customer, right? Nothing more difficult than having this great business idea, having found capital, having found a team, and having incubated properly to only struggle to get access to those key customers that you're trying to get access to. So our approach at the state of Michigan was to, in fact, begin building that ecosystem that connects all these dots so that companies like those I referenced earlier would, in fact, not only have all the resources they need to be successful, but they actually would find Michigan to be a desirable place for them to launch and move to their ultimate success. So let me give you an idea of some of the tools that are in place that I think you ought to tap into sooner rather than later. The first and most important tool, I think, is getting access into our website, right? Our website is really easy. It's michiganbusiness.org. And I would encourage all of you at some point to go on michiganbusiness.org, go to the Grow Your Business or Entrepreneurial Business tab. There are multiple tabs there. And just become familiar with the kinds of tools and programs that are available at the state of Michigan. Now remember, we're not going to be the group that's going to help you grow your company, right? But we are a group that's providing a lot of resources that can be a catalyst and that can help make it easier for you to grow your company. And there's a few things that we do that I think are pretty cool that I'll tell you about a little bit later. So resource number one is michiganbusiness.org. Please go there, check out the resources that we have available to help companies grow. Resource number two is me, right? I'm going to go out on a limb and give all of you my email, right? And so what I want you to do when you get with my email, if you decide that you want to explore our website and you're looking for something that you can't find, then I'm going to open up myself to be the resource that will point you toward whatever it is you're looking for if it's in the state of Michigan. And we either partner with that resource or provide it directly. So my email is really difficult, so got to write this down carefully. It's michael@michigan.org, right? And by the way, sometimes Michael's spelled a little bit differently, so my spelling is M-I-C-H-A-E-L, the traditional spelling. Michael@michigan.org, really easy to get a hold of me. And even cooler, and by the way, if all of you send me a bunch of emails, I won't get them, right? Because we've got a pretty big organization, so there's about 4 or 5 people who are in my email looking for things that I need to respond to and helping to make connections for me because I get so much email. So understand that if you send it to me, it's likely that you'll get redirected to someone. But if you really want to talk directly to me, connect with me on LinkedIn, because I do my own LinkedIn responses, and so those can take an extra day or two, but I usually get to all of them, so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, it's Michael Finney, and you should be able to find me very easily. Remember this handsome face? Easy to remember, and my picture is there, so go on LinkedIn and connect to me. So that's resource number two. And why is that one important? It's important because people like myself who have pretty broad networks of connecting people to business sometimes don't make ourselves as easily accessible as young people like you all need. And what I try and do when I have situations like this, I try and make myself available. And believe it or not, I have, 10 or 15,000 connections. And I leverage them and use them all the time. It's amazing to me how easy it is to stay connected to, say, 10,000 people. You'd think it'd be hard, but it's really not. Because I contact them when I need something, they contact me when they need support or help with something, and it makes it pretty straightforward. So if you run into a roadblock with anything that I tell you, please feel free to send me either an email or connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll respond. So it's an important resource. Now, the third resource that we have available is a network of partners, right? And those partners cover the entire state of Michigan and to some extent even beyond the state of Michigan. We call those partners our Smart Zone Network. And as it turns out, right here in the Ann Arbor region, you have one of the coolest and most impactful Smart Zone resources you're going to find any place. And that organization is called Ann Arbor Spark. Now, I was the first employee of Ann Arbor Spark, so I get credit for having done a startup, right? And actually, I've done a few startups over my career, and Spark just happened to be one that was in the economic development space. And as it turns out, the former president, President Emeritus of the University of Michigan, Mary Sue Coleman, and our governor, Rick Snyder, happened to be the two people who were the founders of Ann Arbor Spark. And then they recruited me to come in to be the startup CEO. So it was a pretty cool thing. Some pretty powerful people helped to launch this organization that we have here in Ann Arbor. And if you know either one of them, you would know that they are amazing in terms of pulling together the kind of resources that it takes to create just a first-class organization. And Spark did some amazing things in terms of building an ecosystem here to support entrepreneurs. Now they operated 3 incubators, and I think they still operate 2 of those incubators. They put together a portfolio of mentor and coaching talent that's really second to none that can help you start businesses and launch businesses in ways that would be very difficult otherwise. They have a pool of capital that can help you with startup resources, that can provide that first $50,000 that you need in order to build out a prototype of your idea or to help with freedom to operate or whatever it is that you need as a resource. They have a pool of capital that can help. They have an ongoing consulting relationship with a lot of consultants who bring amazing ideas that can help you solve small problems that's preventing you from getting to commercialization. And then they have a whole suite of back-end services, whether it's accounting, human resources, legal, and other that can provide you with what you need in order to be successful. So there's this network of smart zones, and Spark, because they're right here in Ann Arbor, is an easy one for you all to get connected with. And we encourage, and by the way, we continue to support Spark with a variety of resources, funding, and other things so that they can be successful. The other thing that we do, though, is once you now are at a point of being ready to launch your business, then we have some other amazing resources at the state of Michigan that can help you. And by the way, I'm trying to fill in all those holes that I described in my opening comments. The first of which is funding, right? We talked about funding. We can help you with funding. We have access to equity, if you're looking for equity capital. We have access to debt capital, so if you have a business that actually has a product and it's bankable, we can help you get access to debt. And then we also have some grants that we provide to companies under certain circumstances that becomes as what I'll call free money, where you simply don't have to repay it or you don't have to worry about giving up any equity in your company in order to be successful. So we help with access to capital. We also have great resources to help you with your talent needs. So if you're now starting to build out the rest of your team, boy, do we have an amazing resource that can help you there. I'll give you one other website to use, and this is the only other website I'll give you. It's our talent website. It's mitalent.org. So that's 2 websites that I'd encourage you to tap into. The first is michiganbusiness.org. The second is mitalent.org. Through mitalent.org, we give you the ability to tap into tens of thousands of resumes of people that might meet the requirements that you have. In addition to that, if you're looking for real specialized talent, you might be looking for a CEO, you might be looking for some real technical expertise. We actually provide what I'll call a headhunting service within our organization to help you find that very difficult talent. And we have a team of folks that literally will help you scope out, and then we'll identify wherever in the country or in the world that talent may be, and we'll try and be helpful to you in recruiting it. So we help you find the talent. And then the other thing that I think is probably the most important resource that we offer, it's the ability to find that first customer. Because when you get to a point of having a product or service that's ready to go to market, and you now need a customer, we can help you find that customer, assuming you're not in the consumer goods business. So if you're trying to sell to each one person sitting in this audience, you just need to have a good marketing and advertising campaign. But most of the companies that we work with are really looking for business-to-business client relationships. And that's where we have a very deep capability to help companies like the ones you may be thinking about. On the business-to-business front, our program is called Pure Michigan Business Connect. And you'll hear Pure Michigan on a lot of things that we do because it's such a wonderful brand, so we try and use it every chance we get. But through Pure Michigan Business Connect, we literally help companies find their first or their second or their next customer, if you will. We launched the program about 3 years ago. It's been wildly successful. Can you imagine a state organization like the Michigan Economic Development Corp helping businesses find new customers? Now, when I was in the private sector, if the state of Michigan had approached me and said, we want to come and provide you with a new service company that Mike is running, and our service is going to be to help you find your next customer, I'd have just threw them out of my office. Go away. You're not here, because the government doesn't do that. But we've developed a model that is pretty slick. And through that model, we facilitated, through the end of this year, about $2 billion of business-to-business activity. Now, how many of you would like to have a business that hit $2 billion as a milestone? I think we'd all like that. I certainly would. Well, we facilitated $2 billion of business-to-business connections over the last 2.5 years. And how have we done that? Well, we've done it because the biggest part of our business model as an organization is not all this entrepreneurial stuff and talent stuff. It's actually helping companies figure out how to grow here in the state of Michigan, companies of all types. You know, very large companies like those we recognize, whether it's Google, General Motors, Ford, or some other really large company. But it's also the entrepreneurial and lifestyle business. So we help companies of all types. And because we help companies of all types, they tell us a lot about their businesses. They tell us when they need capital, they tell us when they need people, they tell us when they are looking for new suppliers. And when they tell us that they're looking for a new supplier, we put that on our list of needs, and we then go out to the 100,000 plus companies we have in the state to see if there are businesses here who can supply those needs. And that process has led us to literally a $2 billion facilitated business-to-business activity. And it's one that I encourage every company in the state of Michigan to try and take advantage of if they are looking to grow and in looking for ways that we can creatively help them. So what we do as an organization, without going into a whole bunch of detail, is that we facilitate business development and growth here in the state of Michigan. And we're a pretty amazing resource. We have a lot of people like me who've had success in starting and growing companies. We have a lot of folks who've had success in financing companies, in structuring deals, in providing legal support, and so on and so forth. And that's available to you. And it's not the kind of resource that you typically find in a state-run bureaucratic organization. But it is the kind of resource that we've become, and it's one that we offer to you. And to give you some idea of the kind of success that we've had in the entrepreneurial space, we literally are assisting in round numbers about 2,500 or so startups here in the state of Michigan. And those startups vary from some that have hit home runs, companies like Accuray Cytometers, Esperion Therapeutics, Health Media, and I can go on and on with some of the companies that have had great success through some of the resources over the past dozen years or so that I've described to you in my comments that can be available to you and to your company. So, I got a question for you before you ask me questions. How many of you are seriously thinking about trying to do a startup? It's quite a few. That's good. And we're finding that more and more students want to do business startups these days. I've got 3 boys, and 2 of my sons want to do startups. One is an entrepreneur right now. He's got a little company that's got an office here in Ann Arbor and one in Chicago. And then I have another one who is a computer science major, and he and some of his classmates have launched a little company called DataDoc, right? And they didn't get that from me because I grew up in Flint, Michigan, where everybody went to work for the big auto companies because that's what we did. But it's the environment that you all are in that I find to be amazing. That young people are talking to each other and talking about your vision and what it is you want to do. And this idea of being an entrepreneur and creating your own path to success is something that I find to be amazing. And so those of you who were kind enough to signal that you're thinking about doing a startup, please connect with me, connect with us. Let us be a resource to you here in the state of Michigan so that you can be wildly successful, like so many other companies that we're starting to see now in our pipeline. And for those of you who are unsure, hopefully this experience that you're having will be one that will encourage you to go ahead and take that step. And for those of you who want to be a resource to companies large and small, consider being a resource here in the state of Michigan. We need the best and brightest young minds so that we can, in fact, become again that incredible entrepreneurial resource that literally led the Industrial Revolution in the United States. And most people don't know that. But at one time in our history, Michigan was the most entrepreneurial location in the world. Imagine that. And we kind of lost it. And what my job is, and what we're trying to do as a team at the Michigan Economic Development Corp, is rekindle that. And we can only do it if you and your peers around the rest of the university and across our state opt to help us. And how do you help us most? By being a part of what we're trying to accomplish, by contributing your time and talent and doing your startup right here in the state of Michigan, and I'd be happy to try and help you. So with that, I'd love to try and answer any questions that you have. Right here. I thought I was going to have an early lunch.
So if somebody's starting a company right now and they're just getting started, what are the things that they need to do to put themselves in a position to capitalize on the first customer program, to get the maximum value from that program and be most likely to succeed coming out of that program?
Yeah, so the first thing that I'd recommend, and I recommend this all the time, is get connected in with your local smart zone. So Ann Arbor Spark is an amazing resource right here in Ann Arbor that I would encourage that company to connect with. And the reason I encourage that is because they will spend the time and effort with you to understand if your business is in fact ready for that first customer connection. So assuming it's a startup and it's now got a product and it's ready to get that first customer, having some level of validation of that really helps our process move more efficiently. So I would encourage that as number one. And if that's not sufficient, if you're beyond that and you've already engaged with Spark, then I would say the next step is to just reach out directly to the Michigan Economic Development Corp. Go to michiganbusiness.org and look for Pure Michigan Business Connect. And we'd be more than, and you then will have the ability to register your company's profile within our network. And what we do when we have companies that register, we then go to our database of companies that are looking for goods and services, and we begin a facilitated process. Sometimes it's one-on-one, so you want to sell widgets to a company that needs widgets. We then will do an introduction, and most likely it'll be a very direct introduction to that company. And sometimes if that's not sufficient, we have what we call business-to-business summits. So let's just say there's a company that's looking for hundreds of different procurement opportunities. We will then work with that company to set up a summit where we'll bring together not just their buyers, but we'll bring in many companies that could potentially supply their needs. And then we'll do a direct introduction so that those companies have a chance to then potentially work together. It's a very straightforward process. And we typically have one of our summits going every month. And it doesn't mean that every company participates every month who might want to sell, but it is a facilitated process where needs have been identified and companies who can potentially supply those needs, we then identify in our database and we facilitate connectedness. But it's a pretty straightforward process. Yes?
There's been a trend in the last few years, in the last decade really, that people are going to college more and more to various degrees, but we're losing a skilled labor base, like your welders and your fitters and that skilled labor base. How is that landscape shifting? I know like for manufacturing companies have a lot harder time finding a skilled welder than they did like 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's a great question because I'm a kid from the early 1970s when I was in high school. And when I was in high school, there was two paths that students were directed toward. One was a vocational track and the other one was college prep. And typically, you know, the vocational track included welding and metal shop and drafting and design and wood shop and those kinds of things. And the college prep, of course, was getting kids ready to go to a four-year institution. You know, as a state and I think as a country, we've started to move much more toward directing every young person possible toward a four-year college education, as opposed to some of these vocational occupations that actually ended up, you know, folks who pursued them in those days did exceptionally well. And a lot of that had to do with manufacturing opportunities, leaving our state and leaving our country, going to offshore locations for cheap labor. But the reality is, much of that now is coming back to the United States. And as a result, we actually have a shortage of individuals who have those middle skills, is probably the best term to use. So welders, CNC operators, mechatronics experts, lab technicians, and I can go on and on. There's just a tremendous shortage of that kind of individual. In fact, our data, we've got a lot of data that suggests that about 55% or so of the jobs that are available right now in the United States are for those middle skills. And then another 15% or so are for unskilled labor. So when you think about that, about 70% of the jobs that are available in the United States right now are either unskilled or middle skilled types of occupations. And then what's interesting, particularly in the middle skills, these are jobs that tend to pay very well, right? How much are welders getting these days?
25 to 30.
That's correct. You've probably checked it out. 25 to 30 bucks an hour. And that's probably on the low side of what welders are getting, right? We have a class going with some students who are studying mechatronics. This is kind of the convergence of electrical and mechanical engineering or technology, right? Where they're learning to program CNC machines and build tooling and other stuff. These young people are starting off making $60,000 to $70,000 a year. And so these are occupations where you actually will you'll earn a wonderful income. And if your orientation is toward those kinds of skills, we encourage folks to pursue it. We've got a number of programs at the state of Michigan. One is called the Michigan Advanced Technician Training Program. It's a partnership between the private sector, MEDC, and our community colleges primarily, where we literally are trying to educate parents, teachers, high school counselors, so that they understand the opportunities that are there to help young people who really are not oriented toward a four-year degree to pursue those kind of occupations. So it's a big time need that we have in this state and in other states. I mean, the reality is somebody's gonna make stuff, right? These chairs you're sitting in, this building, my technology devices, I mean, you name it. Somebody somewhere is gonna make all this stuff that we consume. And if we're not making it here in Michigan or here in the United States, where's it gonna be made at? It's gonna be made offshore. And trust me, manufacturing economies have multiplier effects in terms of economic impact that goes dramatically higher than a pure knowledge-based economy. So if we're going to stay healthy as a state and as a country, we need to ensure that these middle skilled and even to some extent unskilled occupations are supported nicely. But of course, they have to pay wages that allow you to enjoy a decent standard of living, and that's the tricky part. Any other questions? Yes?
You said that you guys specialize in business to business, but straight to a consumer.
B2C? Yeah, so we do. And in fact, Paula's team are really experts. She's got a great team of folks who have primarily been entrepreneurs. They've had a lot of experience in the tech space. Paula is a serial entrepreneur. She also has worked as a consultant in the space. And so when it's not a B2B relationship, it's B2C, we tend to work with our Smart Zone network and other organizations like the Small Business Development Center. They have a technology arm within the Small Business Development Center to help with your business marketing strategies and sales strategies so that we understand how to go to market. So yes, we do help. The same kind of resources in terms of funding and talent and facilities and other things are available. And I'd encourage you to still follow up through michiganbusiness.org to tap into those resources.
So, sir, you mentioned passing
Yeah, that's a great one. Boy, that question comes up a lot. And so Tesla vehicles can be sold in Michigan. The narrative that sometimes comes out when things happen is not exactly correct. So Tesla vehicles can be sold in Michigan just like any other car. The difference is that here in the state of Michigan for many years, there has been statutes that essentially require vehicles to be sold via a dealer network. So the OEMs in our state do not sell cars directly, don't service them correctly. They have these dealer networks, and we all know what car dealers are. And so essentially, what was already the law, in fact, the legislation that was passed, I think was only putting an exclamation point on a law that already existed that basically said, if you want to sell cars in the state of Michigan, you should sell them through a dealer network, and it's up to Tesla to establish that dealer network. Now, if you ask a broader question, should there be a dealer network that's required for all car dealers, that's a whole different question. And opinions vary from person to person as to whether that should be the case. I believe that you should have the ability to sell and market in ways that make sense to you as a company. And, but there are laws that are established in states that dictate how things are done. And in the state of Michigan, the longstanding law has been that dealer networks are what's required. And so that legislation, while it appeared to be something new, it really was more of an exclamation point on a law that already existed as opposed to something new. Yes?
How do you see the politics of the current period changing the entrepreneurial landscape from, say, 50 years ago? Are the statutes kind of being lessened and more entrepreneurial
Yes.
aspects being allowed, or is it being more restricted now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. For those of you in the back, the question was, how do I see the political landscape today affecting the ability of entrepreneurs to get access to resources and be successful versus, say, 40, 50 years ago? I think that was the summation of the question. And so I think that the state of Michigan has done a lot over the last 10 to 15 years to create a robust entrepreneurial climate. And we've seen our funding continue to increase. We spend, through Paula's organization, about $25 million a year or so helping out with various entrepreneurial resources that are needed, whether it's helping to facilitate more venture capital, loan programs, access to talent, supporting the incubator network that we have throughout the state, providing funding to our universities to help with student access to entrepreneurial programs or faculty access. We actually have a couple of fairly large investments we've made with the University of Michigan to help in that space, to assist with technology commercialization. So we've made a pretty substantial investment, and we don't see a whole lot on the political landscape that's preventing that from continuing to happen. It's more a need for us to adjust culturally, right? To build a culture of entrepreneurship, and then to ensure that we're getting the word out and helping young people like yourselves understand how to tap into these extremely valuable resources that are there. Anything else? Yes?
Did the state of Michigan go after the Tesla Gigafactory at all? And then on a broader scope, what are your thoughts on the ballooning government incentives for manufacturing?
Yeah, so two-part question. The first is, did the state of Michigan go after the Tesla manufacturing facility? And the second is, what's my thought on giving incentives to companies in order to locate? And I think we heard that Tesla got a couple $2 billion to locate in Nevada. Interestingly enough, the state of Michigan was not afforded an opportunity to compete for the Tesla facility that is going into Nevada. And that's not uncommon. Leadership in companies, and by the way, when I was in the private sector, I assisted our company with probably 15 different site location projects. And in many cases, we had a really good idea of where we wanted to locate and grow at before we ever started a site search. Our decisions typically centered around access to talent and access to our customers. Those were the two largest considerations. So in the case of Tesla, they decided that Michigan wasn't an option early on. And we don't know the inside thinking around that, but we do know that they did not afford Michigan an opportunity. But in terms of using incentives to do deals, we use them all the time, right? And the reason for them, by the way, the use of tax credits and other incentives in economic development started probably 40 years ago or so, maybe even longer than that. And so it's one of those genies that's out of the box and it's very difficult to put it back in. So what we tried to do here in the state of Michigan to limit the use of incentives was, first of all, to fix all the broken policies that we had. You know, our business tax was out of control. We had thousands of rules and regulations that made it difficult to do business. So we fixed a lot of those things. And so once those are fixed, now the state of Michigan gets far more looks at projects than we historically did. But the use of incentives still is there and needed to fill gaps that exist when we're competing against another location. Our biggest competitor, ironically, is the state of Indiana for manufacturing projects that we work on. They're very aggressive, they're very creative, great business climate, very competitive when it comes to business taxes and costs. And so we see them show up a lot when we're trying to win business. And so if we're in a competition to win a project, and Michigan has a slight disadvantage from a cost standpoint, we use our incentive dollars to close that cost gap, just like any other business would. If you think about us as being a business, we use our resources, incentives to fill those cost gaps. That's how they should be used. Unfortunately, when it comes to really big projects like the Tesla battery facility, incentives tend to get out of control. Our estimate is that that project will cost the state of Nevada on the order of $150,000 per job of tax incentives. And that may be plus or minus a little bit. Our average here in the state of Michigan is about $6,500 per job of incentives. So $6,500, nearly $150,000 per job. So we think we're using incentives responsibly. We think there's a role for incentives in what we do. But the most important factor are the two that I said earlier. It's access to talent that can help grow a company, and then proximity to customers. And those are the things that we try and sell most. Yes?
What do you think it was about the Silicon Valley that made it such a hub for entrepreneurship?
You know, Silicon Valley has been a work in process for probably 35 or 40 years, right? And I don't know the history of it well enough. There's probably some professors here who know the Silicon Valley story a lot better than I do. But what they created was a hub, a cluster of activity around innovation, around resources, access to capital, and because they've had such a long history of it over several decades, they now have the best startup hub in the world, in my opinion. Right? If you look at what's there and you look at the kind of access to resources that are there. And by the way, because Silicon Valley has been successful doesn't mean that we want to become or should become the next Silicon Valley. In fact, we want to be a location that makes stuff, believe it or not. So making goods and services, manufacturing things, I think, is a much better strategy for a region like Michigan than trying to become the next startup hub or knowledge-based economy. Because many of the innovations that are embedded in cars and furniture, processing of food, many of those technologies are the same ones that are being developed in some of these innovation hotbeds like Silicon Valley. And, but ironically, there's some pretty cool stuff going on here in Ann Arbor. And I happen to think that this region has all the right ingredients to be an amazing location for tech-based companies to start up and grow. And we're seeing evidence of that with companies like Accuray Cytometers and Handy Lab and some of the others that I mentioned earlier that literally are starting, growing, exiting here, and creating tremendous wealth here in the greater Ann Arbor region. Yes?
What do you see as being the number one obstacle facing entrepreneurs in terms of growing up from their startups? And what do you think the best way is to overcome that?
Yeah, so what's the number one obstacle to entrepreneurs being successful, and what's the best way to overcome it? I'm going to put that in the context of the state of Michigan. I assume that's your question? Or is it just a general question?
In general.
In general. Yeah, most entrepreneurs, I think, need to spend a lot of time developing their ideas, more time developing ideas than sometimes they do. And then beyond that, it's understanding how to access all the resources they're going to need in order to be successful. Resources like Paula Sorrell and myself and so many others, the early institute here at the University of Michigan. And understanding how to navigate just this alphabet soup of resources that are out there and how to tap into them in an effective way. In fact, one of the things that we're trying to do is serve as navigators. When I offer you my email address and my LinkedIn connection, it's not because I want to spend hour after hour after hour with you, helping you figure out how to grow your business. I actually want to serve as a navigator or as a connector to help you figure out and get connected to those resources very efficiently so that you don't waste far too much of your time and effort doing that. So serving as navigators, those are the kind of things that I think are most limiting to entrepreneurs. There's all kinds of capital available. You just have to know how to get to it. There's lots of talent available. You got to know how to get to it. And I can go on and on. And those resources are available here in the state of Michigan in a reasonable abundance that you can start and be successful here. But you've got to know how to get them, and that's the role that we try and play, is to help you get that access.
University of Michigan, can you please join me in thanking Michael Finney?
That has significant implications for business, both in terms of your product cycle, the life cycle of a product, how long it takes to actually get your development to market,